X-Men and the Scarlet Witch, the road to decimation. It is true that the X-Men have seen their share of catastrophes in their long career as superheroes, but nothing comes close to the events of House of M, a world-shattering, universe-altering moment in Earth 616's timeline that eventually affected most mutants in quite a bad way. The incident caused the X-Men to go on a wild goose chase for some sort of cure during the Decimation saga, and to form unusual alliances to get at the heart of the problem. But before we get into the thick of it, let's briefly discuss the events that caused the Scarlet Witch to lose her grip on reality. Before the storm. This whole mess can be said to have started with the one and only Magneto, and more importantly with his obsession in rebuilding Genosha, his beloved vision of a city bound with mutant lives. So after impersonating Zorg and setting everything into motion, Magneto set out to take over New York City to rename it New Genosha. And the first step to making that dream come true was to eradicate most humans living in the city while keeping a few others as slaves. Of course, things didn't go as planned for the iconic supervillain, as the X-Men retaliated with full force and made New Genosha a failed idea, at least for the time being. Wanda's fall into madness. The chaos that was created by Magneto was only the starting point to an even greater event that would eventually claim the life of various characters. Starting with Ant-Man, who loses his life to a revived corpse-like Jack of Heart, who literally self-destructs in front of the Avengers mansion. Just a bit after the explosion, Vision arrives on the scene, crashes his ship, and releases a few Ultron clones that go on the offensive right away. The story continues with the United Nations dropping the Avengers after Iron Man threatened to kill someone at a conference. But the bad day doesn't end here, oh no. Right after the Ultron attack, the Avengers are attacked by Kree ships that came out of nowhere. This fight then claims the life of Hawkeye, who sacrifices himself to blow up the helicarrier. But the real trouble really starts when the Wasp accidentally mentions that Wanda had children in the past. Searching for answers, Wanda turns to an old friend, Agatha Harkness. In the meantime, the Avengers are trying to figure out why all of this is happening all at once. One theory is that Wanda might unconsciously be responsible for all this madness, and it turns out she actually was. When the team arrives at Agatha's place, they find Wanda, her two children, and Agatha gathered at the dinner table. Captain America tries to wake her from her delusion when she is attacked by Red Skull and soldiers who materialized out of thin air. The Scarlet Witch then goes out of control and fights against Doctor Strange, who succeeds in putting her to sleep. Everything she created through magic disappears, which reveals the corpse of Agatha, who has been dead a long while now. While the Avengers could have prevented the horrors to come, Magneto came down from the sky, taking Wanda with him, again being responsible to some extent for what will soon be known as the Decimation. But more on that later. House of M, the beginning of the end. The event that truly turned the world inside out is only the beginning of a much sinister future ahead of us. But before getting into one of the mutant world's biggest tragedies, let's explore what led to the fateful day dubbed M-Day. The story starts with Wanda giving birth to twins in a room beautifully lit by a setting sun. Around her bed are familiar faces: Vision, Cyclops, Elektra, her brother Quicksilver, her father Magneto, and Doctor Strange, who seemingly helped deliver the babies. The warm-hued scene is cut short when Professor X appears, backlit from dusk as he orders the new mother. Wanda, we talked about this. Put it back. You have no children. There's no one in this room but you and me. Clearly lost in a spell of her own making, the Scarlet Witch refuses to listen to Charles Xavier while showing him her newborn boys as proof they are real. Although Professor X denies what is happening, Wanda is not too far from the truth. They are real. She just created them by means of magic. This does not stop the telepath from pushing and insisting that she put the world back as it was before. Pressuring the witch to come back to reality, he edges her to a breaking point, and consequently her babies explode into shards of glass along with the people surrounding her. She briefly comes back to her senses as she is kneeling on the floor screaming, I killed them. I killed the Avengers. I killed my husband. After she finally calms down, Professor X is joined by Magneto himself, sporting a pajama in his trademark colors. As the founder of the X-Men wipes blood from his nose, indicating how strong Wanda's mind is, although broken, he explains how every single time Wanda slips and uses her magic-altering superpowers, she loses her grasp on reality, or to be more precise, the current reality. And not only does she need an amazing telepath like Xavier to help her return to the reality reality of Earth 616, but they also need to drug her in order to put her to sleep. The treatment helps in preventing her from causing further damage, a practice the X-Men labels as being inhumane. After the Genosha genocide caused by Cassandra Nova's Sentinels, the whole city was turned to rubble, and in the process left Magneto depressed and broken. As he floats in the air over the cityscape, he claims responsibility for what Wanda has done. And that is why he feels compelled to protect her, even if it means putting her under strong sleeping drugs combined with X's mind control abilities. Meanwhile, in New York City, the now old Avengers are assembling at the Avengers' new headquarters, a towering high-tech building in the middle of the city. It seems that Falcon, Wonder Man, and Miss Marvel, aka Captain Marvel, don't have a special entrance card anymore to access the building owned by Stark Industries. As the X-Avengers make their way using an elevator, other guests are on their way from above. Getting out of a dark plane on top of the tower, the X-Men Emma Frost, Cyclops, Wolverine, Shadowcat, and the impressively tall Colossus are met by an eclectic group of superheroes. Along with the ancient members of the Avengers are the well-known characters such as Iron Man, Captain America, Doctor Strange, She-Hulk, and Professor X, who just flew in from Genosha. Every summoned hero is as intrigued as us readers as to why they have been brought in on such short notice. The reason? Decide what to do with the Scarlet Witch and how to go about this delicate situation. Back in Genosha, Wanda is fast asleep while Quicksilver and Magneto argue about the reason why the Avengers and the X-Men are meeting back in the US. Wanda's brother is convinced that the alliance between the two teams only means one thing: they will kill Wanda for altering reality. As Quicksilver keeps panicking, Magneto feels powerless in the face of what's to come. He asks his son, "What would you have me do?" Pietro then falls to his knees in despair as the darkness around the room seems to get heavier by the second. Magneto does not know what course of action to take, but he's always been a man with a plan. Something on a grand scale is clearly starting to form inside the villain's head. Back in NYC, Emma Frost, being the Ice Queen she is, simply suggests that Wanda should be put down. Some, like Captain America, Spidey, and Wonder Man, are firmly against the idea. After all, it goes against their core values as superheroes. Others, like the direct Wolverine, tend to agree with Frost's proposal, seeing no way out of this. While Professor X and Doctor Strange have been working on the problem, they both acknowledge that they haven't been able to find a solution yet. Things don't seem to be looking very good for the Scarlet Witch. While Frost suggests having a vote, Captain America highlights the fact that she is not an X-Men, but an Avenger, so the X-Men have no say in the matter. Since there is no consensus and Professor X himself says he has no idea what to do, the whole gang flies to Genosha to decide her fate. Arriving in the abandoned building where Wanda was held, the group stumbles upon nothing. The whole mutant family is gone. Sensing something strange is going on, the group realizes that the whole room is slowly getting darker, and the professor suddenly disappears. It doesn't take long before they leave the place and follow Emma Frost's lead as she can sense where Professor X has been transported. Arriving at the ruin of what was once a church, Peter's spider sense seems to be picking up something unusual coming from inside the building. A white light suddenly covers the surface of the church, enveloping Spidey's point of view fully as he wakes up in bed out of costume. What is going on? As he gets up, a blonde girl is sleeping next to him. It's revealed through a wedding picture that she's Gwen Stacy, the girl he lost many years ago, and that they are now happily married. At first glance, it looks like Wanda brought Spider-Man back in time, which means that he might get a second chance at saving Gwen from the Green Goblin. That is, if he even realizes what just happened. A new world. After that strange flash, the story takes us to a brave new world where things are far from what they used to be. Take Captain America, for example. Steve Rogers went from a super soldier in his 30s to an ordinary old man of approximately 70 years old. Cyclops and Emma Frost, now a child psychologist, are living a perfect life in their luxury condo. Wonder Man has become a television celebrity, while Miss Marvel, the #1 superhero in the world, is busy catching Gambit, who just robbed a bank. While everyone so far seems to be living harmonious lives, something dark lingers, as Gambit is left unconscious right next to a giant Sentinel statue ready to be arrested by the police. While everyone is going about their day in New York City, Shadowcat, who now goes by Mrs. Pride, is teaching mutant history to kids in Cincinnati, Ohio. Sam Wilson, or Falcon, is now a detective running an investigation on Wilson Fisk, who has been found beaten up the night prior. Switch to Stephen Strange, now Doctor of Psychology, who seems to be specialized specializing in mutant mental health issues. Colossus never left Russia, and Beast is working in a lab with Hank Pym, who is trying to isolate the mutant gene. This is a Project Beast who appears to not have his usual blue fur in this universe, or at least for now, deems anti-mutant. On the other side of the ocean, in Paris, France, to be more precise, Storm is trying out a dress created by Wasp, who in this world became a fashion designer. At this stage, the only mutant who seems to be living through some sort of issue is of course the hot-headed Wolverine, who seems to have kept a connection to the previous universe as he dreams of the time he awoke from the Weapon X experiment. As he wakes up with his claws out, he finds Jean Grey teasing him in bed, and he almost stabs her accidentally. When he finally realizes where he is, he calms down and Jean's skin slowly turns to blue. It turns out it was Mystique, and Wolverine has a strong case of redhead fetish. While this all seems very unusual, Logan runs up the stairs of the building he lives in, where he meets Spider-Woman and Toad, who strangely calls him Sir. Something weird is definitely happening here. Running up to the very top of the building, Wolverine looks at the distance and discovers something terrifying and odd. Over the city are jet planes, a giant helicarrier, and sentinels, all sporting a red M logo. A new empire has arisen, but who is in charge? Madam Hydra? Magna? Or perhaps the ruler of hell itself, Mephisto? Keep this question in mind as we dive deeper into the universe called Earth 58163. But before we dive into Wanda's new world in more detail, please be sure to subscribe to the channel with the bell notification turned on and hit that like button for more Plot Armored Comics content. Wolverine's quest for the truth. As he blankly stares at the sky, memories of what seemed to be a past life flashes through his eyes. His childhood, his time battling alongside the Avengers, the Weapon X experiment, and everything up to the point before the infamous flash of light back in Genosha. And speaking of Genosha, when he asks Mystique what happened in Genosha, she quickly replies with, "I don't know, I haven't seen a paper. What happened? Is Lord Magnus okay?" Lord what now? Shocked, Wolverine realizes right away that she's talking about Magneto, who seemed to have taken over the world, or at least a huge part of it. So he does what anyone in this situation would do. He jumps off the rooftop. Thankfully, he crashes into the platform down below and obviously survives the crash. While he falls, it is revealed that he was on the helicarrier all along, and now finds himself below in the city. Times Square's giant screens filled with people he knows, from MJ Watson to Wonder Man. Wolverine's quest for truth starts with him reading a magazine with Magneto on the front cover. Inside can be found tons of gossip about various mutants and a particularly interesting article about an event celebrating 30 years of freedom from oppression by sapiens. The threat that mankind was to mutants seemed to have completely vanished from the world, leaving former X-Men and villains alike in charge of it and having the spotlight. After Wolverine is done reading what must have been nonsense to him, he steals a motorcycle and rides out of the city, heading for 1407 Gray Malkin Lane, Salem Center, Westchester County, the home of the X-Mansion. But when he gets inside, nothing is like it used to be. No X-Men, no students, no Charles Xavier. The place is now owned by a random family just living their lives. So far, Wolverine has asked 2 people about the whereabouts of Professor X, but no one seems to know who he is. Could it be that he was not included in the new world? What actually happened to him in that church back on Genosha? Let's hit the road with Wolverine and keep looking for clues, shall we? Before returning to New York City, Wolverine gets into a phone booth and calls the operator to get Charles Xavier's current address, but to no avail. It seems that the professor has disappeared from the map, or at least the one of the United States. His next stop would be at the new Avengers Tower, where he hopes to meet with Tony Stark. But of course, he was not in the building, and to make the poor guy's day even worse, a team of S.H.I.E.L.D. agents are here to take him to their headquarters. Contrary to the usual lineup, this S.H.I.E.L.D. team is entirely made up of mutants, including Spider-Woman, Mystique, Nightcrawler, Toad, and even Rogue. A fight ensues until the clawed Wolverine escapes the tower and starts a car chase in the middle of New York. That is until his bike falls right into the Cloak's field of darkness, also known as Dark Force. The X-Men teleport right in front of strongman Luke Cage and his gang as Hawkeye stands right behind him, pointing an arrow in his direction. Things are only getting weirder as powered and regular humans seem to have gathered in some sort of secret shadow association in Hell's Kitchen. A fight against mutant kind is clearly boiling under the surface, turning the X-Men into a group of villains akin to Magneto's group back in the day. But if Xavier's team of superheroes has never been assembled, then who is strong enough to stand between Magneto and his dreams of enslaving humanity? New Genosha. While things are getting more confusing by the minute for Wolverine in New York City, Magneto, or Lord Magnus, has swapped his PJs for clothes fit for a king at Castle Magnus in a now flourishing Genosha. But as he proudly stares at the city he's overseeing, a small child comes up to him, gifting him a toy boat. The boy is revealed to be his grandson, a mutant child who can create things with the simple use of his mind. While we don't know the actual whereabouts of the Scarlet Witch at this stage, it's safe to say that she must be somewhere in the castle. And she actually brought her children back, or at least a third iteration of them in this shiny new universe. Things are not looking as good back in Hell's Kitchen, where Hawkeye, Luke Cage, and their gangs are standing up to Wolverine, who is desperately trying to figure out what's going on. According to the discussion between Cage and Hawkeye, S.H.I.E.L.D. has actually become an enemy of some humans, or sapiens as they call them. We see that Wolverine is part of a group called the Red Guard Army, led by notorious supervillain Sebastian Shaw. Not wanting to take any chances, the archer dressed in purple shoots an arrow right at Logan, leaving him for dead. But we all know how enduring the man is, right? So Wolverine casually gets up from a pool of his own blood, surprising everyone as Sentinels crash the party to eliminate any sapiens in their way. Everyone is saved only because of the quick thinking of Cloak, who teleports them to a building miles away. Now that the commotion is gone, Wolverine takes a moment to explain where he comes from and the reality that he so vividly remembers. But when he gets to Magneto's children, Lorna, Pietro, and Wanda, something even more surprising happens. Hawkeye specifies that although Pietro and Lorna are in fact mutants as they should be, Wanda was born human. Wait, does that mean that she transferred all of her powers to the boy that we saw earlier? Something wicked is hiding in plain sight, my friends. Amongst all the people present during that scene, the only one who remembers the world before is a girl named Layla Miller, who will later join the X Factor and play an important part for that specific group. She also acts as some sort of witness to the others, proving that Wolverine is not in fact totally out of his mind and telling the truth about Earth 616. Layla has a mutation that will be quite of use for Wolverine's journey to make everyone remember their past lives, since she succeeded in showing Luke Cage the events of Avengers Disassembled by the sheer use of her mind. After getting that important bit of intel, Wolverine brings the whole crew, armed to the teeth, to Emma Frost's apartment and proceeds to have Layla make her remember. As both the girls and Frost's eyes start glowing an unusual green, Emma's life flashes through her eyes. She remembers everything. Snapping out of the identity Wanda created for her, Frost comes back with only one thing on her mind: murder. Inside Layla Miller's mind. But before going all revenge mode, Frost decides to take a tour inside Layla's mind where she can't quite decipher what her power is. You see, her powers, and I quote Frost on that, are psychic but not psychic. Whatever that means, this just adds an extra layer of mystery around Leia's origins and goals. But before the leader of the X-Men has enough time to make sense of all this, Cyclops comes back home from work. By Frost's request, he too gets Layla's treatment and is brought back to reality in a flash. The group doesn't waste time and heads for the next logical target, Peter Parker. The group then proceeds to ambush Peter in the middle of the street and have Layla work her magic. He is suddenly attacked by visions of his past self, his battles, his wedding to Mary Jane, and sadly Gwen's death at the hand of the Green Goblin. Losing balance, he falls on a nearby car and with tears in his eyes stares at the new universe's living Gwen and Uncle Ben. It looks like in this universe, Wanda actually did him a favor and gave him everything back that he had lost, which, as you can imagine, will make things very, very complicated for our friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. After Logan tries to comfort Peter, who is having a total breakdown on top of a building, Layla and the gang travel around the country to give old X-Men and Avengers their memories back. They start with Shadowcat in Cincinnati, then move on to Doctor Strange, Miss Marvel, Iron Man, Daredevil, She-Hulk, and last but not least, Captain America, who now lives in the Bronx. But things don't go quite as planned, since in this universe, Steve Rogers never got frozen in a block of ice after World War II and was left to grow old as anyone else. Consequently, Frost decided that in this shape, the super soldier was no use to them, so they decided to leave him be. Back in their hideout, the X-Men/Avenger Alliance discussed the situation and tried to come up with a plan to take the House of Magnus down. When suddenly S.H.I.E.L.D., who apparently does not know how to use a door, crashes through yet another wall, demanding them to surrender. A brawl ensues where lasers, purple clouds of smoke, spiderwebs, and lizard tongues go every which way. The only person in the room that could stop this madness was not the almighty She-Hulk, nor the almost invincible Wolverine, but Layla, the girl with the weird green glowy eye powers. As Rogue grabs her by the hair, the little mutant goes into psychic, not psychic mode, making every single member of S.H.I.E.L.D. revert to their original selves. Looking for a man with a plan, Miss Marvel turns to Wolverine, and his answer is quite the direct one, as expected of the Adamantium Man.
We go to Magneto, right to him. Guarantee you he knows exactly where Xavier is.
And the truth is he does, but Wolverine won't be happy to be reunited with the Professor, or at least what's left of him. You see, back in Genosha, Magneto, accompanied by his daughter Lorna, is lost in thought in front of a giant rock that reads, Xavier Memorial Garden. He died so Genosha could live. Well, that is a shocking twist indeed. So Xavier was the secret ingredient that the Scarlet Witch needed to affect so many people. If that's the case, then Lila's little trick might not do much for the founder of the X-Men unless they find a way to have Wanda revert the spell and recreate Xavier. But there's only one small problem. Let's not forget that Wanda is now human, or at least according to what the tabloids want us to believe. And if the rumors are true, then Doctor Strange might be the only one in their group able to work the magic to bring things back to normal. But while Strange is an expert when it comes to time magic, can he handle chaos magic? After all, he denied its existence when this whole mess started. We shall soon find out. Avengers Reassembled. Before getting to Genosha, the group needs a more strategic plan. So they decide now that they have S.H.I.E.L.D. agents and a powerful telepath, they could infiltrate one of those giant helicarriers to set sail to their destination. During this time, Lord Magnus was having some sort of highly publicized event where he took photos shaking hands with a maskless Victor Von Doom, aka Dr. Doom. An unusual alliance. Still in the helicarrier, Luke Cage tries to reach Jessica Jones, but she doesn't pick up, making Spider-Man wonder if he should try to call Mary Jane, now a famous actress. While the others are still in shock from everything that is happening and not doing anything productive really, Cyclops comes up with a plan, one where he asks them to fight without any restraint, meaning that the plan to kill Wanda is back on the table. No one really fights against this plan this time, but Spider-Woman has a few things to say about Wanda's spell. She highlights how most people in the room got what they wanted, that the Scarlet Witch might have in fact improved everyone's lives by making the mutants the superior species. While she's not completely right, she's not entirely wrong either. Some humans like Hawkeye became prey to Sentinels, making their lives much worse than they were before. Getting back to it, Cyclops becomes impatient and wants to go back to his plan and form 3 separate teams to get things started. The team finally arrives in Genosha during an event at Castle Magnus that looks like a night at the Oscars, where celebrities like Black Panther, Dr. Doom, Janice Vale, Storm, and more walk the red carpet, all in flashy outfits. This is where we finally see the royal family. Pietro, Lorna, Magnus on his throne, 2 identical twin boys, and at last Wanda, who decides to make an appearance. The party is cut short as a Sentinel tries to crash into the whole family before Magneto and Lorna stops the humanoid robot and pushes it aside to engage in combat with a team of superheroes. While the brawl continues at the castle, Cloak, Emma Frost, and Layla search for Xavier's location. Their hopes shatter when they encounter the moment created in the Professor's memory. That is until Cloak goes inside the ground using Dark Force to discover that there is actually no coffin, nor a body under the monument. So Xavier still might be out there, and perhaps still linked to the spell that is holding this new reality together, and the key to bringing everything back to normal. The Battle of Castle Magnus. As the battle rages on, the castle is not looking too well with everything exploding, but Magnus's fancy home is not the only thing that seems to be falling apart. When Lorna asks Pietro to take Wanda out of there, he notices something very strange about his sister. Unconscious in her brother's arms, Wanda looks like a Tetris game in reverse. Geometric pieces of her floating out of her body and away from her, much like her infant boys when they shattered like glass at the beginning of House of M. There is strange magic at work here, and Doctor Strange arrives at the scene just in time. Sensing powerful magic away from the battle, Strange flies to a tower nearby, entering it through a window. There he finds Wanda, looking well, building a castle out of blocks with her two sons. She explains to the sorcerer that the body that is slowly falling apart on the battlefield is not actually hers, but a clone she created so her father can show her off on big occasions. Once again, she is aware of her own powers, but not that she actually created this world and her children. Strange explains to her that not only was she the architect behind this new universe, but that she actually created Layla Miller in order to bring them where she is. Wanda politely denies what he is saying, telling him she has no idea what a Layla Miller is. Not only did Wanda create this new Strange character, but she might as well have created her own father, since Magneto was rumored to have died a year ago. Living in her own bubble, it seems like she's never leaving the tower. Just happy and calm playing family. She's even confused when Strange discusses the outside world where their friends are fighting. This seems to wake her up from her strange dreamy state, as she mentions the purpose of all of this was that there would be no more fighting. Insisting that the situation is not as easy as pointing fingers at Magneto, she shows him what happened the night before the X-Men and the Avengers met to decide Wanda's fate. As the night replays itself in front of Strange's eyes, it turns out that Magneto had absolutely nothing to do with the reality warping spell. It was actually all of Pietro's doing. Quicksilver convinced her to change reality to make everything better, and in the end was only trying to save his sister from being killed by a group of superheroes. Remembering the truth brings Wanda to a state of sadness, and then activates something powerful in her as her eyes turn red when Strange asks her where he can find Xavier. But before she can do anything, she falls to the ground, an arrow stuck in her back. While Layla is busy giving Magneto his memories back, Hawkeye is disintegrated by Wanda's son's magic. Hawkeye's second death brings Wanda to a state of panic where she admits not being able to control anything she created. Outside of the tower, Magneto shows up pissed like never before as he confronts his son about what he did. But as Magneto smashes Quicksilver using his powers to control Sentinel parts, Wanda's tower shatters in half as she magically holds her father, erasing his mouth so he'd stop talking. She then floats down to her brother lying there dead and revives him. The Scarlet Witch breaks down, cursing her own kind, and speaks the words, "No more mutants." A bright white light engulfs everyone. As the spell is cast, Doctor Strange seems to be trying to fight it, but it's too late. M-Day. What happens next is rather ordinary, or at least it appears to be. The sun rising on a world that has reverted back to being Earth 616 as Layla wakes up in her bed in New York City, looks out the window and sees nothing out of the ordinary. No flying helicarrier, jets, or sentinels wearing the House of M crest. Peter Parker goes back to being with Mary Jane, but hasn't forgotten what he lost and wakes up in his original world with a bit of regret in his eyes. After everyone had their morning coffee, the members of the Avengers meet at the tower to discuss what happened, but not everyone remembers the events which unfolded at Castle Magnus. Spider-Man throws a tantrum and breaks the meeting table since he already misses his perfect life back with Gwen when Doctor Strange appears out of nowhere looking like he just lost a fight to Galactus. Things are clearly out of sorts for our heroes. While some Avengers can't remember what happened, the true tragedy takes place at the X-Mansion where everyone is panicking and most students have lost their powers due to Scarlet Witch's last spell. But amongst all that chaos, an interesting thing happens to Wolverine as he regains all of his past memories. His amnesia is suddenly cured, perhaps as an after effect of the spell, one which never truly worked on him. One theory is that the reality-altering magic might have some physical effect on the brain, and Wolverine healing as fast as he does might have just undone the damage he received when the first flash happened back in the original Genosha. This opens up a myriad of new journeys Wolverine could take in the near future, but that's a story for another day. Back at the X-Mansion, Emma Frost tries to locate every mutant using Cerebro, only to find out that most mutants have been turned into humans, bringing their worldwide numbers down dramatically. She also tries to find Xavier and Wanda, but with no luck as both are completely off the grid. News across the world report the mutants' loss of power, some in an objective way, while others welcome the news with open arms. Since no one but those who were present at the battle at Castle Magnus remembers the House of M events, this all puts the mutants at an unfair disadvantage, as now that they are depowered, the persecution they have been living with will only grow, making them vulnerable to ordinary citizens. And that idea is further supported as the Avengers stumble upon Hawkeye's costume hung by arrows on a wall of an abandoned mansion, accompanied by clippings of a newspaper article reporting his death, as well as Ant-Man's and Vision's, a warning to all mutants. Suiting up, some of the X-Men who kept their powers head to Genosha to interview Magneto, who is back in his previous depressive state, all alone, living in a ghost town. But unfortunately, he has no answer to give them, for he is just as confused as everyone else and is visibly lacking his former powers. House of M closes with Wanda being all smiles and shopping in a small mountain town in the middle of nowhere, as Henry Pym's voice can be heard over the radio saying, "For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. So I'm asking, what will be the reaction?" The reaction, in fact, has a name: Decimation. Let's keep journeying into the new Earth 616 and find out what happened to the X-Men and hopefully find a cure, shall we? Decimation, the day after. The morning after Scarlet Witch's spell was cast is by far one of the most disastrous days in mutant history. The infamous day dubbed M-Day starts chaotically for most mutants. After losing his abilities, the Blob is left as a bag of skin begging to be ended. The X-Corps headquarters in Paris is blown up as a truck filled with explosive crashes through the first floor's windows, and every mutant group across the world is way too busy trying to get the situation under control as best they can to help the few X-Men who are left with superpowers. Across the world, tragedies are occurring left and right, as a girl who is revived by Mr. M dies as if a bullet magically hit her. Antonio, a mutant who had pyrokinetic powers, perished in a volcano after his powers were taken away. A flying mutant fell to his death, and so on. In the meantime, ONE, or Office of National Emergency, is preparing to launch brand new models of Sentinels that they have been secretly developing for a while now. As we will see soon enough, while they present themselves as protectors of the remaining mutants, their thirst to overpower and control them will only grow, making them very dangerous enemies disguised as allies. Led by Valerie Cooper, their first mission on M-Day turns out to give the X-Men a surprise visit at the X-Mansion. Within the walls of the mansion, things are not going very smoothly. A lot of students lost their powers, one even drowning because of it, while some, like Wither, find out they still do the hard way. When he thought he was finally free from his ability of literally withering anything he touches, he runs to the young wallflower and touches her, which had the consequences of completely killing her right arm. As mayhem spreads, Emma Frost, who keeps pouring herself drinks but smashing them against walls, makes the hard decision of letting those who lost their powers go. This results in the X-Mansion being almost totally emptied out, making the future of the X-Men quite dire. Unfortunately for our favorite mutants, ONE is not the only organization threatening their freedom. Reverend William Stryker, now with a brand new purpose, is collecting TV appearances and gathering haters for his crusade against mutants, which leads to various attacks against the new powerless mutants, like a bomb attack targeting a truck full of new humans. And if things weren't bad enough, Apocalypse has awoken from a long slumber and, of course, more powerful than ever. There are countless things happening across multiple places involving various characters, but to make it brief, it's not going very well for most mutants. Actually, it's bad. It's going very, very bad. While some are running around scared out of their minds, others, like Beast, are more poised and working hard to find a solution. While no cure has been found at this stage, there are some examples of some individuals regaining their abilities. Iceman is a very peculiar example. Out of some sort of PTSD, he thought he lost his powers, when in fact he experienced a sort of mental blockage, which somewhat got fixed when he was in mortal danger. Magneto's other daughter, Polaris, faked not having lost her power for a while until it became a bit too obvious, and she was evicted from the X-Mansion. She eventually ended up joining Apocalypse, becoming Pestilence and regaining her powers. But there was yet another who went to greater lengths to not only get back his powers, but to amplify them to new levels. That person was Quicksilver. After attempting to take his own life, Quicksilver is taken by Crystal to the moon to temporarily live amongst the Inhumans. There, he begs to have access to the mist of Terrigenesis, which he believes might have a chance to restore his superpowers. The Inhumans leader refuses his request, so he goes behind their backs and enters the sacred room. He then realizes that he did not only become faster, he can now move faster than time itself, making him able to time travel and even meet his future self from a few days later. Together, they conspire to get more and more exposure to the mist and even steal some Terrigen crystals. A new plan emerges in his mind, and he thinks he can save mutant kind and restore all of their powers using the crystals. But the mist turns out to be addictive, and even his own daughter Luna can't get enough of it. But that doesn't stop him from going back to Genosha. There he meets with some of his fellow mutants still living among the rubble and gives them a taste of the miracle rock. But Callisto, who has super senses, can now feel things so intensely that even raindrops hurt her skin. This means that the mist is a dangerous drug that has the potential to increase mutant abilities to levels difficult to control. Hearing about what's going on in Genosha, one whose increasing presence is being felt crashes the party and takes ownership of the Terrigen crystals. And of course, the trouble doesn't end there. Oh no, the Inhumans pay a little visit to Genosha themselves, asking one to give back the crystals. And when they refuse, the Inhumans officially declare war with Earth before going back home. Quicksilver, who inhaled an unholy amount of mist, can now literally see the future and has gained a brand new power, turning back mutants through touch. But with how bad things went with Calypso, there is no way of knowing what kind of curses he is putting on these reborn mutants and if this is a permanent solution. After one has turned the X-Mansion into some sort of mutant concentration camp, riots caused by humans in Mutant Town are on the rise. Beast goes on a solo mission to find a solution to all this madness. One of his first questions about the whole situation is, where did all the mutants' energy go? Searching for a cure. Is there a way to actually answer this question? And if there were, how would they gather this energy and restore it efficiently into each mutant? Wouldn't repopulating mutants through some sort of breeding program help save the whole race? Well, that is exactly what X-Factor's Multiple Man suggests to Beast, but the scientist simply replies that the project is in actuality impossible since mutants are more often than not born out of human parents. And besides, the mutant gene itself, as we will see later, has experienced a fantastic change. After asking the most brilliant scientists in the world like Mr. Fantastic for help in order to find a cure and ultimately failing to do so, Beast turns to unlikely individuals, a band of supervillains including names like Dr. Doom, Zola, MODOK, Pandemic, Sugarman, and Mr. Sinister. Of course, most of them declined his offer because why would they help one of their worst enemies? However, the X-Men finds help from the now disgraced geneticist Dr. Kavista Cow, the inventor of the mutant cure dubbed the Hope Serum. Agreeing to let Beast use all of her data since she planned on abandoning her lab anyways, the mutant starts analyzing her great collections of mutant DNA samples. But one thing is not quite what he had hoped for. The mutant gene within every single drop of blood is now inert from when Wanda casted her spell. This not only means that he won't be able to use these samples to bring back the mutant population, but also that every mutant's DNA might not even have the ability to bring mutant offspring into the world. While everything seems quite hopeless, Beast doesn't stop there as he continues his journey going from abandoned site to another, including Weapon X's concentration camp Neverland, where he realizes that someone has been a step ahead of him searching for data in all of these old institutions. It turns out it was his alter ego from another universe, Dark Beast. The evil version of himself, being quite the pragmatic man, decides to join forces with him, thinking this would accelerate their mutual goal. Together, they travel around experimenting on corpses in Genosha or paying a visit to a family mostly composed of mutant members out in the country to ask for a little DNA. Things take a turn for the worst when Dark Beast decides to give one of the boys some necrotized DNA from one of the Genosha's fallen mutants, as the boy has a near-fatal reaction to it, making Beast believe that science might not actually be the solution to the equation. And that is why he finally turns to Doctor Strange, who gives him a magical presentation on Wanda's spell and its consequences. He explains to Beast that reality has been consumed by her spell and that the magic is woven through everything. welded to all there is. He refuses to cast a spell to fix things, as he warns Beast that all of reality could implode as a result. Across the multiverse, other beasts are also trying to find a solution to the Scarlet Witch's spell, as it seems to have affected every single universe there is, turning mutants into a species in danger of extinction far and beyond. While Beast has almost lost all hope, he ends up in a remote European country where he has a chat with a woman named Wanda who looks exactly like the Scarlet Witch but denies being her. In truth, she isn't, but is a sign pointing toward the real Scarlet Witch's whereabouts. Because the real Wanda Maximoff did survive after House of M, and she is closer than anyone expects. But she is not the only one besides the X-Men in the Avengers that returned safely from Earth 58163. Her sons too, or at least to some extent, but this is another story for another day. Before coming back home empty-handed, Beast decides to go back to Neverland and bury the victims of the Weapon X experiments in hopes of finding some kind of closure. But there's still a lot of work to be done to fix the problem. If neither science nor magic can do the trick, then what can? Will they eventually find out where all the mutant energy went? To be brief, yes, absolutely. And the answer lies north in Alaska, the home of a very interesting mutant who will come to be known as Omega. However, we'll have to explore that saga in another video. Well, that wraps it up for this one. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. I've been Morse Code, and come back again for more exciting Marvel comic book content.